Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams notes, the babelfish, said, is a small, yellow, and leech-like, and probably the oddest thing in the universe. It feeds on brainwave energy, received not from its own carrier, but from those around it. It absorbs all unconscious mental frequencies from this brainwave energy to nourish itself with. It then excretes into the mind of its carrier a telepathic matrix formed by combining the conscious thought frequencies with nerve signals picked up from the speech centers of the brain, which has supplied them. The practical upshot of this is that if you stick a babelfish in your ear, you can instantly understand anything in any form of language. The speech patterns you actually hear decode the brainwave matrix, which has been fed into your mind by the babelfish. Skipping ahead. The poor babelfish, by effectively removing all barriers to communication between races and cultures, has caused more and bloodier wars than anything else in the history of creation. I'm a writer. I've written 3 books, published hundreds of writings in the form of essays, video game, and film reviews. On top of that, I've written reams of documentation and project proposals for the Congressional Research Service, the American Chemical Society, and the National Institutes of Health Technology departments, among others. I've written articles published in newspapers such as the Washington Post and USA Today, and finally, on no less than 4 occasions, I convinced young women to go out on dates with me based solely on my written correspondence. So it's with no small sense of irony that I'm going to stand up here and spend the next few minutes discussing the idea that words and language frequently get in the way of communication amongst us human beings. As Cassie said earlier, when we were at Sunday services and they asked what the service was about regarding art, she said art is an expression of love, and she would figure something out for it. And then 24 hours later said, Micah, figure something out. And Renee, in her duties of putting together light, as time was going on, was saying, I need a blurb, I need a blurb, I need a blurb for the service. And I threw together the quote that art helps us bypass language, which gets away in communication, gets in the way of communication. It was the first thing that popped in my head. I sent it off to her, and it got printed in the light. And then I have spent the next several weeks trying to figure out what the hell I meant by saying that. And then I thought about it. I'm also a bit of an art history buff, taking courses on the subject off and on for the last 20 years or so, as well as being an avid reader on the subject. And mankind has really 2 tendencies other than wanting to kill each other, and that is they decorate and they simplify. That's it. They really do decorate and they simplify. Art predates the written word, as you can see here. Cave drawings, graffiti. We spent a lot of time looking at the art of civilizations, and we learned that if it's a bare surface, we'll paint and carve on it. And the more important something was to a culture, the more chances are we would likely decorate it. Like the Mycenaeans, they put very elaborate art pieces on their scabbards and their spear tips. We, as a people, need to express ourselves, and not everybody is good with words. Hell, for a long time, there weren't really words. So, I want you to know that as a writer, and thinking about this service, I spent several days writing roughly 2,000 words to say to you. And then at 4 o'clock this morning, woke up and said, wow, that was dumb, and got rid of it. When I say that we decorate things and that we tend towards abstraction, and I had all of this art history reasons to talk to you about this, to talk about how there's the Mycenaean scabbard, but we went from this with the Greeks, to this in the Byzantine era, from this in the Renaissance to Van Gogh, Norman Rockwell to Picasso. Every single time we peak in realism, we immediately go back and work our way back to simplicity and try to distill things down to their core idea. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about today, that kept driving in my head to the point where I threw away the art history dissertation that I was going to give and simplified it down to this. Why do we always try to simplify? It is because we are constantly trying to distill down to the message. Words, descriptions, verbiage, details. All of these things can, and often do, distract from the message. I had a lot of ideas, again, where I could talk about this, and then I really realized that there were 3 things I could do to demonstrate this. And I'm going to play to my strengths and start the first one off with a story. When I was growing up, some might say I had issues. I was slowly but surely losing my mind. And the medications I was on was exacerbating the problem and making it worse. But anytime my parents took me to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and they asked me how I was doing, I would grunt like most teenagers and say, fine. However, I also was showing a budding interest in the arts and in drawing in particular. And my parents kept finding drawings lying around the house that communicated that I was anything but fine. I've always been a writer. I've always been a good writer. It's actually the only reason why I graduated from high school, because I certainly didn't do any homework. Please do not take that as a life message. I've always been able to use words to communicate my thoughts freely and easily. But certain things were too hard for me to talk about, so I drew them. And I would leave them lying around. My parents would find them and say, our boy needs help. It was the only clue they had to what was going on with me. I was able to communicate my message more effectively. Fast forward. I'm now a grown-up-ish. I am adept at words. I am good at speaking. I practice it so I can become a public speaker someday. And I'm here in the church. And a member of this congregation receives, good timing on that, a text message and a phone call saying that a close friend of theirs that they've known for years has died. I'm good with words. I always know the right words. And I was standing there completely frozen with no idea of how to communicate my sympathy. And Julie Woody walked up to this person and put her hand on her shoulder without saying a word. And it conveyed everything. I was so busy looking for the words that I lost the message. In screenwriting, they always teach you a very simple adage. It's called show, don't tell, stupid. So I could sit here and talk about all of the things that we get, that I could actually try and have it give you a speech, that is a speech using words, saying words get in the way of communication. Yes, the world's most oxymoronic sermon. So, Rather, I'm going to show, not tell. I've already started with using Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade, which some of you may know and others may not, is a telling of the Arabian Nights. It is a telling of Scheherazade telling the Arabian Nights to the Sultan. The quiet string in the beginning, the solo, was her talking. And as the music gained in scope and grandeur, it moved into the epic tales that she weaves, and the rest of the orchestral pieces are all the stories she tells, occasionally dipping back to her interactions with the Sultan. All of that, the 1001 Arabian Nights, epic story, lots of words, and conveyed beautifully through music, with 0 words. Mankind is driven to decorate. Mankind is driven to express themselves. As Cassie mentioned earlier, we find beauty in patterns and in nature when I rather, with almost Tourette's-like glee, blurted out the Fibonacci sequence, which is a numerical sequence, for those that also don't know. It's a numerical sequence that is found in proportions in nature, from everything from the twist of the DNA strand to a spiral conch shell. It is everywhere in the universe, this mathematical proportion. It is the perfect number sequence. We are drawn to it. It is sacred. We want to express its potency in us, and we put it on our bodies. I have been stabbed numerous times, not with just a kitchen knife, but also with needles as I grew up having to get shots for eye asthma. And so I never wanted to get a tattoo because I've been poked enough. But there are people out there who have designs that I created on them. And that was a huge honor because somebody said, hey, I want to carry your art around with me every day. It means that much to me. And it meant more to me when they asked me to create. But I'm still telling and not showing. I'm aware of that. As you can see, I opened up the piano. And that's because multiple times in my life, I have been unable to express myself through words. There was a picture I almost put up here that I left up on my monitor after I painted it, after I moved here, to tell my parents I was not okay. I was not able to communicate what was going on with me, and so I painted it. But I can't look at the thing anymore because I did a good job conveying that emotion, and I never want to see it again. But there was another time when I was very sad and lost, and the only thing I had access to was a piano. And I'm going to play that song. And then I'm going to follow that song up with another song where I was happy and wanting to tell a story that was happy. And yes, this is part of the discussion because this is exactly what I'm talking about. The interesting thing about that, gotta remember the delay. The interesting thing about that is that after I played that song the first time, and it came out whole cloth, fully formed, I felt better. I had communicated what I needed to. And then strangely enough, I immediately came out whole cloth with something that was completely different. There are many ways to convey ideas: dance, song, music, paintings, photography. Everyone, no matter what their skills or talents, has a need to express themselves in some way, shape, or form. I've heard athletes describe that they dance on the basketball court. That when you see them play, you are seeing their truest self. I don't know what that says about hockey players. But everyone has a need to express themselves in some way, shape, or form. And with that, we're going to move on to joys and sorrows. As you can see, I actually took off the overshirt I was wearing because I deliberately wore this one. This shirt is actually very new, and Renee is going to zoom in on it so that you can get a better look at it. And if you might notice, as we continue the cycle of our art styles, that this looks an awful lot like those cave dwellings. Everything that is old is new again. And we always strive for simplicity. And with that, we will extinguish this flame.